I'm Paula Caligiuri. I'm the co-founder of Skillify, but also a university professor at Northeastern University in international business. I have an IO Psych background, taught in HR for years at Rutgers University, and yeah, now 13 years at Northeastern. At Northeastern, I teach both MBAs and also undergrads, and in both cases, we're doing for MBAs, it's like a global leadership class, and for my undergrads, it's kind of that cross-cultural management type class. So I have lots of years of experience on this, lots of ideas as a faculty member sitting in those seats. I also know that a lot of us are crunched for time. So if you want to throw it in the chat, that's fine. But like, about how much time do you think you might have to give this? Because sometimes it's 10 minutes in class. Sometimes it's just pointing students to it. I don't have any time at all, but I want them to gain something from it. And sometimes it's more. It's like a discussion board or reflection paper, or maybe a lecture or two. And any of those are fine. If you already know, put it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and share, that's fine too. Um, if you have no
Hi,
idea.
it's Karen. I'll just get started. I use it at UNC Wilmington, and the way that I integrate it is we have the X Culture project embedded in an international management course. And I find that talking about cultural agility enriches the conversation before they get into these global teams, because we've talked about Hofstede and Globe and national dimensions and so forth, but now we're dealing with people. And so it really is a nice segue to that kind of conversation. I have them do the activity. I have them do both of the free assessments on their own. I have them do a small reflection as a easy assignment before they get into the classroom. And that way I make sure that everybody's preloaded in their mind. And then I bring up my profile and we start. So I really dedicate an entire, definitely an hour lecture to it, but we revisit it after the project is over as well. So I find ways to just continue the conversation because it layers onto other things that I'm also that I have as major course outcomes. So I hope that helps others that are on this call. If you haven't used it yet, there are many different ways that you could do it, but that's just one example of how I've figured out that this helps me.
Thanks, Karen. I do that something really similar. I have students prep, like I have them do a little assignment beforehand to prep the two assessments that are in there. And I'll share more on what those are, but it kind of leads them in. And I also revisit it at the end to do a little bit of that pre-post work. I think we've got something in chat. Any of those you listed, still trying to figure it out. Cool. For sport. Okay, cool, cool. All right. Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that. A lot of times we do see a lot of our faculty using it like you do, Karen, as like part of a prepare to work in teams and then collaborate, or alongside a conversation about cultural values and cultural differences. A lot of faculty use it in OB classes just to help understand kind of diversity of values. And we're seeing a lot more in professional development. And actually, that's kind of where I wanted to start, is just saying, kind of man, why this, why now? Because it's we're not too many people talking about culture per se, uh, but they're becoming more relevant, and not so much about or for global issues, but because we're needing individuals now to be more adaptable than ever before. So these are competencies that we're seeing are just basic professional skills that our graduates will need more than they've ever needed before. So, LinkedIn named it or found it as one of the most in-demand skills, being adaptability. ACNU identified adaptability and flexibility. World Economic Forum, again, same competencies. We did a study through Skillify, actually unrelated. We started doing some work with the tech industry, and we were just asking tech leaders about soft skills and sort of these skills that help people become effective in situations of novelty, help them be more adaptable. And 94% of them, these are tech leaders, said that soft skills like curiosity, resilience, perspective taking were going to be critical for the future. That actually, that even, we did the study, that one blew me away because I thought, the tech skills would be reigning, AI skills would be so critical, but it's actually their acknowledgement of, hey, yep, the world's changing. The world is becoming, complex, ambiguous, diverse. But what we're needing now is for what's remaining that's human, we need individuals who are really good at being human. So that means really good at being in situations of novelty, really good at interacting across functional groups, across generational groups, as well as across, national differences or, whatever the difference might be. So it's kind of big for us, even if you don't want to think about it as, kind of the old national cultural differences, the idea of building this contextual agility, that ability to quickly, comfortably, effectively work in situations of novelty. This is becoming so imperative for us, especially we're seeing it mostly out of business schools, but we're also seeing it in engineering programs and a lot of the sciences as well. So for what it is, pause. I'm going to pause there for a second. Does anyone want a little bit more on the framing of why? I'm very happy to. Sorry, I'm going to have a little bit of a hard time monitoring chat here. Um, Social work. Yep. Yep. Those are, so the note in the chat is study abroad. So we have a lot of our students out of Global Experience Office at abroad. And one of the things that they do is use it, actually, much like Karen was describing, they use it to help students kind of prepare for their ed abroad experiences to enable them to kind of get more developmental gain from those experiences. Similar to if you use like COIL or X Culture or any of those, if you use it at the front end, students get a lot more out of the experience while they're having it. And again, these are gifts that you're giving your students if you can help build it. Okay, so all right, moving on here. What we know just from what, how do you build this contextual agility? How do we help people be really effective in novel environments? It's kind of three things in combination. It's that purple gear, sort of just the minimal awareness of what could potentially be different. So that's kind of a big first step that like just, hey, how might the way I've been socialized differ from the way others have been socialized? And it's kind of a nice awareness, but it's not usually enough. So oftentimes we'll do like in education abroad, we'll do hey, you're going to France. Here's some things you should know about France. That's great, but it's not enough. So cultural values, you'll always see me talk about both pieces of this, cultural values on one side and the competencies on the other. The values, we have an assessment for that so individuals can understand themselves and others. That's on myGiide. And also we have an assessment of competencies so they can understand themselves. And then of course, how to gain and develop those competencies. Within the competencies, there are six that we can talk about if you want, but it's curiosity, resilience, humility, perspective taking, tolerance of ambiguity, and relationship building. Those six kept coming up again and again and again. They came up whether we were talking about people working in another country, working on a diverse team, working cross-generationally, switching from one company to another. It was like anytime a human had to go into a situation that was new and novel, those competencies kicked in. So kind of important. And then the third gear is just everything we do at the university. And it doesn't necessarily need to be education abroad. Of course, that's kind of a gold standard for putting students in situations of novelty, but we have opportunities to have students experience novelty in kind of in the classroom and in the coursework that they're doing. If they're working in teams, a lot of us have service learning opportunities. Many of them are in extracurricular activities that put them in situations of novelty. So this is all kind of really, if you think about, we're preparing them on values, we're preparing them on competencies so that every experience gets accentuated as a developmental opportunity. But let me pause there because that kind of frames why we really can move the needle, and we can move the needle in our educational experiences. Please feel free to unmute yourself if you want to share anything.
Paula, I just really liked how I like, even though I use the tool, I learn all the time. And I really like how you positioned it, that it's not just global cultural awareness, but it's moving from one institution to another, right? One company to another. So these are the kinds of things that I need to also talk about in my classroom to, make a broader search, because I know that some of my students, they're taking the international management course, but some of them are not really interested in being international managers. They might not ever want to leave North Carolina, but this is something that I can say, well, this is many layers with cultural agility. And yes, it could be working with different populations, differently motivated people, different stakeholders throughout processes. So anyway, I really like the way that you framed it. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. And actually, there's a report that I can send you if anybody's interested. The one I mentioned about the tech leaders and their perception. That seems to get the attention of even my most like my finance students who are, barely interested in anything other than kind of fintech or tech skills or whatever. They hear it because they do understand that they have to become better at the things that will make them more competitive, that will give them a competitive gain. The other thing that they completely hear, is that a lot of their tech skills have a half-life. A lot of these skills, like what's working now isn't going to work in 2 years from now, 18 months from now, whatever. But these are durable. So once they gain them and have them, they are theirs forever. So they definitely hear that as well. And again, happy to help positioning. If there's anything you need along the way, just we have a lot of resources for this stuff. Um, Kind of moving to what is it? It's a pretty simple tool. You go to myGiide.com. Probably the most challenging thing, especially for all of us who need reading glasses, is that there's two I's, no U, and no L. So the two I's together kind of sometimes look like GLIDE, and you definitely don't want to put that in. But the two eyes, if it helps, what I would say to my students is, we help people see eye to eye. So it's myGiide. What they'll do as soon as they go on is click whether they're an undergraduate student or a graduate student. Or if you're working with executives and you want something just more general, you could just say, none of the above, just curious. It'll put them in the professional, along the professional track. They need to create, they just put in their name and password. My recommendation is have them write down their password, but people don't. They can always reset it. But anyhow, it's really user friendly to get them up and running on it. Um, Karen mentioned that the free version, and so everybody sees this as kind of the first page. There's the About You, which picks up some demographics. The demographics kick in more, sort of are used more if you're doing, say, for example, an exec ed program for people who are going to be working in another country. That will get into a lot more of the if you're, married and you have to think about, your spouse's ability to work in another country, or if you have children, what that will mean for their education. So there's demographics that might not resonate for the students, but they're used in different ways in different parts of the system. But that's kind of a like little throwaway one for your students. The other two are relevant. So my cultural agility assessment that includes all the competencies. So that tolerance of ambiguity, resilience, perspective taking, humility, relationship building, and curiosity. That's under the cultural agility assessment. Cultural values assessment is the values that will sound a lot like somewhere between Hofstede, Globe Study, Schwartz, Hall. So for those of you, this is recognizable for those of you who teach culture. If you don't, these are the eight that came out, and I'll explain what they are, but they were the eight cultural values that came out through a critical incident analysis. But you can use them when you teach, kind of theoretically teach culture if that's what you're doing. The both assessments for those of you who are doing it in class, if you have class time and you want to say, okay, everybody pull out your computer or your phone, jump on, take the assessments. I usually give my students about 15 minutes to complete both. And they have varying levels of English and they can usually complete it pretty easily. One's 24 items, the other is 32 items, but it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Anything on that, on how to get in? Okay. So then where we go is what I'm going to do now is sort of split this up. I'll share everything around the cultural values piece, and then I'll share what you can do with the cultural competency piece. In the perfect world, you have time to do both, or you send an assignment to one or the other. But I always think it's better to cover both. But hey, use it however you need to. But on the value side, I mentioned that there were eight of these that were covered. These are the eight that were used. Again, they work pretty well with any, if you are teaching a class, I guess, Karen, like you do, that's international management and you want to theoretically teach the Hofstede or Schwartz or Globe or whatever. These work really well with those. For those of you who aren't, it's really easy to say that I'm sorry, not competencies, these were the cultural values that emerged as being the most critical when people were working outside their home context or the context that they were socialized in. Um, Kind of right off the start, we talk about culture as not being I'm from the US, therefore I am, or I'm from Germany, therefore I am, or I'm from China, therefore it's not that. It's however many or how much or how in whatever way you've been socialized to have the values that you have at present. So it could be family of origin, it could be your educational system, it could be the sports, your faith community, it could be where you grew up, whether it was a rural or urban area, whether there was diversity or not, how much travel experience you've had, your professional culture, your generational culture. So all of it starts to layer on to give you the values that you have at the moment. Um, Karen, you brought up the example of you show your values relative to your class. Every now and then I'll do that with mine just to show generational differences, even though I'm the only one represented from Gen X. It always is kind of funny. The students always sort of get a chuckle out of generational differences and then explain it. Um, on the free version, the students will be able to see where they are on these continua so they can kind of better understand themselves. Sometimes just doing this surprises them. Sometimes they're saying, "Oh, okay, well, I didn't realize I was, this, but okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense." So what I like to do, if you're just using the free version, this is kind of what the students will have, and I tend to do three things with them. The first one, and really important one, is have them understand where and how that they ended up on that point of the continuum. So students are great at creating their narrative in terms of, oh yeah, I was in my my parents were in the military, so I was socialized to have very fixed time. We were always on time or always early. Or, oh, I was raised in a rural community and we were just everything was really communal and we never locked our doors, and that's why I'm very collectivist. They kind of see how they land on that um on that continuum. So what I often will do is then either partner them or put them in groups. Partner if they're a pretty homogeneous group. Sometimes I put them in groups if they're very diverse. And what's sort of fun is that they can kind of compare where each one is on the continuum. And if they're very diverse, what's kind of interesting is to see people who ended up on the same point of the continuum but got there in different ways, or being really different and then just having a really comfortable conversation about how we differ and why. It's just such a nice way to make it not about us, them, but about humans being different, um, just being raised and socialized differently. I've done this, the third one, a few times. Admittedly, it takes a bit of time. Sometimes it went well. Sometimes it's like, it was kind of meh. But I'll add it. If you have students who are getting kind of antsy sitting in seats, for too long, sometimes I'll send them running around campus doing just clicking off pictures of I'm sitting in Boston, and so it would be U.S. culture. Have them, click images of what they think represents the US culture. And they do a pretty good job with it. Like a student sitting by themselves in the student union, or they'll go to there's a little grocery store near on campus, and then they'll look at all like the single serve things or lots of choices. So they get it, and it kind of works, but it does take a little bit of time because you're sending students out and then they have to come back and put together give them some time to put together a little bit of a deck and then present it. So it's a little bit more. But all of this reinforces that cultural awareness. And that's all with something you can do for free. May I pause there and see if there's any questions on that one? Keep moving. Okay. Um, then starting in January, this will be available for the students to compare themselves to others. So oftentimes what I'll do with that similar exercise is I'll have them click whatever their home country is. So in this case, the United States, and they compare themselves to like, hey, I don't sit on every point, every average of like where the US is. Why would anyone else? So it's a way to talk about stereotypes without kind of lecturing about stereotypes. It's also a lot of fun if you have any students who are dual citizens. They'll start because that has 194 countries where it says country of interest on the top that's circled. They can click whatever country, but they can kind of toggle across different countries. They say, oh yeah, I'm like this. This is more my mom's side of the family. This is more my dad's side of the family. And they see it. Or students who are international students will say, oh, I've been in the US for, 2 years. And oh, this, if I was back in, China or Korea, where like they might be, oh, I'd be a little bit more over here. But now that I'm here, it's showing up at this end of the continuum. And that's cool. I mean, all of it's just a really rich discussion, and all of this takes it away from, if country, therefore blank. Like that just is yeah, just something you don't want to reinforce. And I wouldn't recommend teaching that. Yeah. And then for those of you who are like, I think at least one of you are doing kind of the education abroad. This is also really nice because you can use it to say, click on, say they're going to Paris for their study abroad. They can click on France, compare the two, and then say, okay, here's what you might see. How might you see it? And then have a little conversation about that. That's actually really helpful. So there's lots of different ways to use it. Um, and this would be if it was assigned per student. So then with as part of there's a subscription model where you can go and actually look at groups at a time. This one I do with my MBA students a lot. I'll basically show the class as a class. And basically what's happening here is the bigger the circle, more students are occupying that point on the continuum. So they get to see like, oh, okay, wow, we're not all obviously the same. And then it's like, okay, well, if this were a group we had to manage, what would be some ground rules that we would need to have, or what might be easier for some than others if we had like certain norms within our organization? So the MBA students kind of play around with this in terms of leading a global team, having a global team. If you have a COIL group or an X culture group or just a project group, if you have five or more students in that team, they can do this as a team and then talk about kind of some of the challenges that they might have. Um, yeah, it's a really, really effective one.
Can I just ask this really interesting? Did you or a student like overlay that? So we would all like for all of us on this call, we would do our own assessment and then we merge it together. It's not part of the tool, but it's something that they manually did or you did.
No, this is it. This is part of the tool. It's part of the subscription.
Okay,
And
that's
it's a
pretty awesome.
really, really powerful one. Um, yeah, okay. So we also do this with companies, and sometimes they're just trying to understand diversity within their corporate culture, and we overlay like their company values with what the responses were on this, and it's really interesting to see like how they interpret the challenges they're having relative to what they see. So there's a couple different ways that you can use it.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a really again these are part of the subscription model,
Okay.
but it's a pretty powerful opportunity. But any questions about the value side of this? I'll move over to the competency side. But are there anything I can ask or yeah, answer?
I think this is wonderful, Paula, because when you mentioned like how it's used at work in in organizations from that aspect, I can see how well it can be like a conversation starter, right? Like doing like at retreat, staff retreat or something. This could be a good activity for everybody to launch like the new year, the academic year, I guess, on having like a baseline of where things are at, and then maybe like reconvening the following year. And then with the students too, maybe doing it as a pre and post, as you were mentioning, right at the beginning of a class, and then at the end of it, kind of seeing, did they shift? Does it also provide that opportunity for them themselves to see if they've shifted and changed
Oh,
and
it
to what
sure
extent?
does. It sure does. And that's nice, especially on the competency side, because if you're doing anything that any of our classes now probably have more experiential work, experiential exercises, group work. They'd like to see that something changed as a result of having, participated in those. And it seems to shock them. Like it seems to shock them that they surprise them that they like, oh my gosh, my tolerance of ambiguity moved or my curiosity got better. But these as well, sometimes with the companies, we'll see that, they'll actually do an active like, oh, we want to have more of a participatory culture, high performance culture. So we need people to speak more directly and actually operate a bit more informally and more egalitarian. And so they want to see scores shifting in a certain way. So even on the value side, Helen, to your point, that's kind of interesting to look at pre-post. Or if you're very intentionally creating a class culture, and you want to see if the class culture kind of socializes the way people value interacting, that's a nice way to do it as well. But there's lots of different ways to use it. It's an extremely flexible tool. Sorry, I guess I have to monitor chat here. Oh. somebody put something in the chat. Let me go there. Oh, no problem, Nicole. Okay, I'm listening. Study abroad programs. Yeah. The Ed Abroad is a really a nice application for this, especially the cultural values one. If you want to give students a little bit of prep before they go, or have them do some work independently before they go, it's a nice start. The competency side, I think is probably I'm really excited about, because these are those durable soft skills that our students will need going forward. These are those durable soft skills that, if you're seeing, like, LinkedIn is filled with it now, saying, a lot of the competencies necessary for the future are more human. These six are the ones that continually are coming up as being critical. So curiosity, tolerance, ambiguity, resilience, humility, relationship building, and perspective taking. And all of these sort of interconnect to make people effective. So, take humility, for example. You go to a new company and you don't assume that everything you do and every way you do it is the right way. You acknowledge you could be great at finance, accounting, marketing, whatever, but you need to learn how to be effective here, or be effective with this generation, or be effective in this, country, whatever. Relationship building, we learn through one another. Curiosity, we need to be able to ask questions, and to be, again, kick in humility and say, I really would love to know how to do that here. With tolerance of ambiguity, it's that ability to just say, you know what, I can linger a little longer in this situation of ambiguity without believing that my brain can understand everything when it really can't. Not yet. And of course, perspective taking, seeing that something could be different, or you could appear differently through the eyes of others. If we could do just this for our students and move the needle on these six, we're giving them a really big advantage in the workforce of the future. So with that, also on the dashboard for free, they can kind of assess where they are. Kind of a little warning that some students would be like, oh, something less than 10. I mean, we're all in grading season right now, and I don't know about your students, but mine, if they get anything lower than a perfect score on anything, they freak out. I don't know. And with this one, we just really have to help them breathe it through. A couple things are going on here. One is that this is based on STEM scores of people who have had significant international, global, and diversity of experiences. So their scores, so we're kind of looking not as a population as a whole, but as a kind of a truncated part of the population. So this is sort of moving scores kind of mid to down a bit, which is good, because what it does is it spreads the variance, and it helps people see what's a natural strength and of what's a bit more personality driven, hardwired on how their bodies handle serotonin and dopamine and the like, and what is kind of natural, and what maybe needs some developmental attention. And as soon as I say that, even my most, high achieving students kind of relax a little bit. It's also written in the tool. So if they read, which many don't, that's an issue. If you have a little bit of time, what's nice to do is try some exercises. Like these are just a few that I've used and still use. I have students spend a week asking for assistance, praising and showing appreciation to build out their humility. And some students are like, this is the easiest thing in the world. I do this all the time. And other students are like, I am so independent. This was so hard. But I realized, wow, people really do like helping. Excuse me. With relationship building, I have my students asking two more questions than they normally would in any given conversation. And there too, it's always really funny. Their reflections are, you can't chat GPT this, because it's just so real. And I have them describe real conversations. And they're funny, and they're like, "Oh, I ask questions all the time." So this was easy. This was no big deal. And others were like, "This was brutal, but I had the best conversation I've ever had with my roommate." Or, um, you know, I asked two more questions to my mom, and she wondered what was wrong with her. But wow, we had a great conversation. Like they see the advantage of just being a little more curious about others and asking questions in that kind of intuitive, active listening and active engaging. They get it. They get it, and they definitely the scores move like when they engage in some of these things. Um, Perspective taking, I've done a few different exercises with. This one is kind of nice. We all assume that we land in the same place for the same reason. So they could ask a fellow, accounting major, like, how did you end up in accounting? And like, oh, I love numbers. And like, oh, well, my mom wants me to go become an accountant. She thought that would be really good for me. Or I don't know. It seemed like those were the only classes I could get, so I ended up in accounting. They all come out with something different, but it's the ability to see the same outcome from different perspectives. So these are some sample exercises. I've got lots of them if you need more or need other examples. But yeah, we teach a whole class on this, but it's kind of fun. And then again, now if it's assigned, so this is getting out of the free version, but if it's assigned, the students actually get a report that's filled with, every competency, where they scored, how to build that competency, so challenges that they could do in order to build that kind of as a development tool. It's tailored to them. It's useful, helpful. A lot of faculty will assign this and then have them submit it as proof that that they did this. You can see whether students signed in, but if you need proof that they can either, sort of hand in the whole report or hand in the cover page or something. But this is a really nice approach. This year, what I did with my MBAs is I had them take the assessment, and then from the report, they had to select one competency that they wanted to work on through the semester. And they had to work through all of the challenges. The challenges are on the tool, but they're also in the report. And that seemed to work really well. I think I'm going to do that again next year with my MBAs. With my undergrads, I had everybody do everything. So with this also, they on the subscription, they have the ability to kind of march through some challenges. So we have these weekly challenges, or march through, but like work through some challenges and earn badges. I'm always amazed at how motivating gaining a badge is for students, but it's sort of fun because they can work through different challenges and get more points, and they seem to like that. We also do some conversations about um, their strengths and how those strengths can amplify and be leveraged within a new situation. And then we also talk about developmental opportunities, but I usually lead with strengths, um, with an understanding that absolutely every single one of these can be developed. Yeah. So there's lots of things on the tool itself. And then this is Helen, what you were mentioning about, looking at change over time. We can actually look at the group and say, okay, again, like where the circle gets a little bit bigger, that's where we see more of the students occupying that point on the continuum. And not surprising, what was lower, um, especially in the post-COVID reality, the tolerance of ambiguity and resilience. So what's nice to see is whether that will change, over time from the beginning of the semester until the end of the semester. That one in particular, that change over time, or I'm sorry, the snapshot of where students are at any given time. If you're thinking from a programmatic perspective, you can look at the one that the group overall is sort of the lowest in, and maybe do like a group level intervention if you don't have a lot of time, or you want to do something like a workshop for business students or whatever that might be. That's kind of a nice way to use this, but there's lots of different data that you can pull from this. You can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's something called comparison filter. You can also look at the scores at the beginning of the semester and at the end of the semester, or the beginning of the year and the end of the year, or before a study abroad and after a study abroad. I have some universities doing freshman year, and then they're having them retake, their senior year and see what changed. So there are lots of different ways to like leverage this tool. And that's a pretty nice one for um, for accreditation, if you're looking at pre-post, and want to show that the things that you're offering from the business school perspective or from your university's perspective is helping build out these competencies. It's just a nice data point to have. And then we're getting pretty close to sort of where everything I wanted to share. Then we can just open it up for questions. But this is what the students will see. I don't know if you can see at the bottom right of the screenshot, it says retake my assessment. The students are able to look at their current score relative to their original score. And then what I have my students do is write about how did it change? Why did it change? What changed? Why do you think it changed? And they're really surprised. They'll say things like, I was stretched because I have them doing virtual global brigades, which are consulting projects with virtually though with small business owners in Honduras or Panama. And it's a big stretch for my undergrads. Some of them do X culture, some do COIL, like depending on which class and what. Um, yeah, and some of it's just like teamwork, projects, and the groups are diverse. Sometimes it's the weekly challenges or having them work through challenges, and they'll see that the one that they actively worked on was the one that moved. And it gives them some motivation to keep trying those weekly challenges. Students have access to this, for however long they're in your system, so they can kind of go back and use it and reuse it, which is nice. Yeah. And then, so with this one, I do have my students write a reflection, and they're 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 always a pleasure to read. I know at the end of the semester, it's hard to say that anything's a pleasure to read, but these are truly enjoyable to read because it just is probably very rewarding for everybody to know that what you're doing matters, and the students see it. So it's really beautiful. And these are just some of the quotes. They get it. They get it. That these things do matter. Because I can't leave without sharing a few resources uh, within the tool. Around the subscription, there's a tool called Bridget. She's nicknamed that. She's an AI bot, of course, but she's nicknamed Bridget as in, bridge it. But she takes the students' scores into account when responding. She's a relatively new feature. Admittedly, she is not perfect, but she's getting better. But she's getting pretty darn close. But it's really cool. So you can ask Bridget a question, and this one was, "Oh, I'm studying in Dubai. What should I know?" And it's, she's conversational, just like every other ChatGPT. But she does talk about, whoa, you're a little more informal. You might want to, be a little careful. This one's a little more formal, or, you're a little more hierarchical. That's great. So is you. So it'll sort of, kind of coach the student of things that they should consider looking out for with respective values. And then some actionable pieces of advice they can do. but it doesn't have to be about a country. It can be about, hey, I'm going to go work for PepsiCo, or I've got an interview coming up. She's really pretty flexible. There's some guardrails on her, some things she won't talk about, but she'll give advice generally around the values and the competencies relative to a novel experience. So she's a resource. And then the last thing, I'll just want to leave this slide up for a second because it's kind of dense. But the part that's in the middle, that LinkedIn Learning, for if you're with a university that has a subscription to LinkedIn Learning, that there's a course that I've done for them called 6 Skills to Develop Your Cultural Agility. That goes through, it's about 45 minutes, 40 minutes or so altogether, but it goes through each of the competencies. So the talent, ambiguity, resilience, perspective taking, humility, and gives a little of the background at how to gain it. Easy to assign if you have a subscription. If you have a leadership class or an MBA class, there's also another course that I've done called Managing Globally, which goes through some of those values and how that might affect how you lead. So those are 2 resources, again, probably more useful if you already have a subscription. On either side, the so on either side, if you want more info about myGiide on the right, I don't know why. Oh, I know why. Sorry, this was a leftover from a different presentation. But if you want more information about the myGiide subscription, you can click on there and get some information. Diane will contact you and set up, basically open up a demo for you and your colleagues. You can kind of play around with the premium features. And on the left side, this is kind of useful just to have. It's that hey, I won't replace you, but your lack of soft skills might. That's the report on those 6 competencies and what tech leaders were saying about them and the challenges that they're having developing them. So those are kind of some resources that are available. I was going to stop sharing unless there's some slide that somebody wants to see again, but I have a few minutes. I'd be happy to open it up for questions.
Hi, Paula. This is Nicole. Sorry. I
Oh, no.
apologize that I'm off camera. I was wondering for Bridget, can you upload team scores and have Bridget help you navigate how to work within a team? Or is it only based on like the cultural, the national cultural profiles?
Oh, you know what? We always had her working through an individual's profile. So their cultural values and their cultural competencies, cultural agility competencies, so those 2. But I would wonder because those scores would be embedded in a student's like site. I don't, that's a good question, Nicole. It's a really good Diane question. And she's sorry she couldn't make it today. But I'll try to find out that answer for you. I think right now it's individual. I think it crawls to that basically uses the data of the student to reflect back. I don't think it uses the data of the team.
Okay. That's great. I'm also happy to reach out to Diane too, but yeah, that could be interesting. I just think, especially with a lot of the COIL projects and things like that, just to have really just a team's kind of perspective versus the national. But it's all very helpful. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Any other? I'm again happy to. Yes, I
A
will
shameful
be.
plug for me too.
Absolutely. No, I'm looking forward to it. Yes, I am. I'm keynoting at WISE, and I've got a workshop and a session at the forum as well. So for those of you who are in it abroad and just can't get enough. I'm also available. So again, I'm a faculty member also. I'm always happy to share resources wherever we can.
Yeah, this is great, Paula. Thank you so much. Lori and I are both from Adelphi, and we're trying to think of ways where we could implement this. And I think knowing that it's something that we could use with small groups of students, because we have a pocket of students in one program and a pocket of students in another program, I think it could be really beneficial. So we'll be noodling on this over the January break. So thank you.
Absolutely. And if you want to open up to actually see all the features, as a group, feel free. If just for your like background, for those of you who want to do a demo of all the features, if you have at least 5 people, that's great because then it'll unlock all of the group level data. So if it's fewer than 5 for confidentiality, we don't share score. No scores are shared. They're all shared anonymously, but none will be shared until at least 5 people go. So it's just a demo option. I think if there's fewer than 5, what Diane's been doing is adding like kind of fake people into your group, just so you can see all the features.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, happy grading, everyone.
Yeah.
Let me know if we can be of any help going forward.
Thanks.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.